uh, with their time off. Everybody's got a little bit different situation, and maybe something will match your own situation as well. For example, Chuck,
Yes.
what have you been doing with your time?
Well, most of the time I'm getting up in the morning and getting ready to watch some programs. My wife and I record a lot of programs with Smithsonian programs, and
With what?
on the program they are on the Smith
Oh, the Smithsonian.
channel,
Yeah.
which is on 634 Verizon, and they have a series here on aerial America, and they do something on flying over every state, and they did this some years ago, flying over all the different states and talking about the history of the state. And it's very interesting. We've done about 8 or 10 of them so far out of the 50. And there's another program on that I'm recording that's let's say a spy program on Smithsonian on Sunday night, and they go into true stories about things that have happened in the history. Last week was about the Iran, back when the Iranians had the overthrow, and they captured all the people in the embassy except 6 CIA agents that made it out, and they eventually were rescued. And it was a very interesting program. My wife and I saw the movie a few years ago. It's called Argo.
Right.
And so that was so we do a certain segment of that. I do a certain amount of reading, and I go out for a walk, try every day for a mile and a half, 2 miles, and I do our shopping, maybe every 8 to 10 days. And it hasn't been a tough experience at all. I've gone up to Wilmington Market Basket, and they haven't been that busy when I've gone up there. They have it set up that you have to get in line if there's so many people, but only 1 out of 3 times I had to get in line, and it was only in line for less than 5 minutes. And I wear the mask, and I wear the gloves, and I'm in and out of there as quickly as I can. And so my wife and I, we go out to some of the drive-in food places, McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, every other day or so. So that's pretty much it for the most part.
Omanon? Just because on my screen you're next to him.
Okay. Well, my situation is a little different. That given that I still teach, so I have gone from face-to-face teaching to virtual teaching, and that has been a challenge, and to reinvent the modalities of replacing that student interaction in the classroom with the virtual thing. And on top of that, then we have my whole time is actually taken up by, most of the time is taken up by the classroom work and organizing the different discussions. But on top of that, we also have a lot of administrative meetings to streamline various aspects of how the medical school is coping with different aspects of the COVID-19, because there are lots of pressures built around that, various demands on the medical school facilities. And so medical school has been asked to run or manage the facilities in Worcester. So that's how they have taken over couple of those facilities. And that has all, so that means most of my time has been spent indoors trying to get my bearing straight, in fact, to live virtually. And at the same time, actually, my children do my groceries, so they leave it's kind of fascinating that the world we are living in is that my son does the groceries or my daughter does the groceries. They leave the groceries outside, and we watch them from inside or watch them from the porch, and then they vanish. And at the same time, earlier our granddaughter used to come to our house and she would visit and we would have fun with her. Now we can't, she cannot. So we have this social distancing problem. So she is, so we do the face to face with this WebEx with her too. So it's kind of a fascinating world where we have landed. And so that keeps us busy so that we try to find time to interact with her, interact with all the other people we need to interact with, because now given that we are virtual, we have also found out that we need to contact with a whole bunch of other people we never did. So it's kind of interesting, different kind of life which I find myself in, and it's good that way. It has brought a different kind of life into our universe, which I had never thought of.
I'm sympathetic. Paul.
Well, I kind of a boring life right now. I get up in the morning, have breakfast, do a couple of Sudokus, then walk the dog, watch some television, get the news, and settle in and kind of really watch the news programs for probably a good 5 hours. And they do rehash a lot of the stuff that I've seen day after day. I've also been listening to some of the different events that are happening that that are associated with this, and I'm learning a lot more about the virus. Like for instance, that lady who died in early February. They said that that was probably 4 months of 4 weeks after she was infected, and so that infection would be beginning of January, and that actually that corresponded to this is the same time that I had a bad cold that lasted almost a month. I'm curious whether I actually had it or not, had the CD19 or not. But I don't think I did. It was just a different virus. But I every now and then, every few days, I go out to the store to buy some things just to get out of the house, and fully masked and gloved, and it's kind of interesting to see the different stores and the different people, how they approach. In Wilmington, they're pretty good about maintaining the 6 feet. And Bill Ricca, the guy in front of me, was standing probably less than 2 feet from the person who was in front of him, and he didn't have a mask or anything like that. He was probably in his 60s or 70s. And I stayed at least 8 feet behind him. And so it was interesting. This was the line to get into the store, and that was good, because they count the people going in and they count the people going out, and that's how the line moves. For every person that comes out, one more person can go in. I guess that's the way it is with a lot of the stores. But I do try to watch the president's press conference every night, as long as I can stand it. I really wish they would just show him from the head up, because when he talks, he's always moving his hands, and it just drives me crazy. And he ends up every sentence with "we'll see," meaning whatever I said, we'll just have to see if it's going to be the truth or not. And that drives me crazy. I'm an engineer, and I'm much more interested in facts than philosophy. And so, at any rate, that's I'll get into that when we finally move on and start talking about issues. Today's meeting was I thought was very interesting. And,
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about that, because today I did what I've been doing basically ever since this started. I'm a little different. My situation is a little different than the rest of you guys, in that I've, for many, many years, been a volunteer shopping for elderly shut-ins. So this really doesn't change anything. It just makes things a little more difficult to find what the people would like to eat, because number one, it's not there. And number two, it just takes longer. Even if what I'm looking for is available and I know where it is, it just takes longer, in part because of the 6 feet thing.
I'm curious, you shop for a number of people at the same time. How do you do that? Do you get one master list and put it in? Rosemary's asked me about it.
In part because of how we were doing it before this started, it tends to be one person per day.
Oh, okay.
So I call up, I get a list, I go to whatever stores I'm going to go to. Then it's constantly making phone calls. Well, they don't have this, then what would you like? Or they have the wrong size or whatever. It just takes a long time. But what I should do, and what I used to do many years ago, was get a list from everybody. And when I was in an individual store, as long as I thought I had a way of storing the food, I would shop and buy whatever. And then the difficult thing was organizing who got what food. It's the back end is easier this way, but it's far less efficient. One of the things that happens is that I don't get to listen to the 5 or 6 hours of Cuomo and Trump talking at people about what's going on. So be interested to hear, since you were listening to today's broadcast and it was very interesting, be interested to hear how you feel about it.
The way I feel is that Como amazes me every time I see him. He is on top of all of the facts, and the way he presents them, they're all very, very logical, and I'm really surprised at how organized he is, how intelligent, and how well presented all his stuff is. And then, to compare that with the federal meetings that seem to be completely disorganized, and the comparison between the two is just amazing. Uh-oh, do we lose it?
Chuck, I think, was off for a little while, and I hope he's coming back in.
My view is all of a sudden very, very small.
Now you are actually looking at Chuck's screen. Actually, he has gone out and you are looking at his screen, although I think he's sharing his screen.
Chuck,
I
are you
don't-
there?
I'm trying to be, you can hear me?
I can hear you. I can't see you.
I know, I can't find myself. I lost myself.
All right.
So
I'm
only
trying to
thing you
get
got to
back
do
on.
to take a look at the camera. Click on the video camera at the bottom.
Bottom.
Oh,
There you are.
okay.
I'm back.
Yep.
You're back. Okay,
I
good.
don't see myself.
You are there.
I
Yeah.
am.
We can see you. I told some people who, when we decided we were going to have the meeting tonight, that they should tune in because it's not clear it'll be informative, but it should be very entertaining.
Chuck, it's
This is an
Ted.
example.
Chuck, it's Ted. You need to minimize your screen there. You're on a screen capture right now.
I see.
You're actually showing us your desktop.
I see. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, kill that.
Okay.
One more.
All right. I think I see what Ted's seeing now.
Yeah, you somehow did a screen share here. Hold on.
Yeah, I think he is sharing his screen. You need to get out of the share mode.
That's a useful thing if we could figure out how to utilize it.
Yeah, I mean that's what we do. We share the screen, then we teach.
Ah,
So you have to be a host. I think Tad can get it out. I would imagine as a host.
okay. Well, Paul, you were saying what was interesting. What did President Trump say today?
Well, a number of things happened in that meeting.
Yeah.
First, he started talking about the virus going away after the summer, and
Okay.
heat. The heat will kill the virus and make it go away. And I guess I mentally point out that many of the cases that are around the world are in the southern hemisphere, and that's their summer. So I'm not so sure about heat is going to be the thing that saves us. He also talked about light, getting out into the sun and ultraviolet. And he was saying that we should try to figure out how to introduce light and ultraviolet light specifically into the body internally.
Okay.
That seems to be kind of crazy. Putting a heat lamp inside the body or an ultraviolet light inside the body.
Who said that? Who said that?
Trump.
Oh, I didn't. I
Sorry.
didn't. Oh, okay.
Can you guys hear me? It's
The
Tad.
next one was
We gotta
speaking of things getting into the body, we should try to figure out how to get disinfectant inside the body so it can attack the virus.
You know what? 1 second, Chuck.
Yeah.
You need to go to the bottom of your Zoom screen, and there'll be a green button that says Screen Share. It says Share Screen. If you hover over the bottom, put up your Zoom, and now where's the Zoom where you're seeing everybody? You need that screen.
Trying to find it again.
It may have gone to the top. Has it gone to the top? It's a green icon top.
Yeah, it might be
green
on
bar.
it's on the bottom of the top.
Because he may have fiddled with it, gone to the top actually.
Yeah, no, I think he hit it on accident is what he did.
Yes. So he has to unshare somehow.
Yeah, I don't see either of. I keep putting my mouse and wondering why nothing's happening on my screen.
Okay.
I don't see either of the things you guys are talking about. I see the strip along the bottom which has got all 4 attendees. But I don't see the thing that says screen share or anything like that.
Right now, what we are seeing is we are seeing actually Chuck's desktop.
Okay,
And although we have our little icons of our pictures on one side, but the major portion of the screen is occupied by Chuck's Zoom. It says Zoom in the middle.
right.
You see that?
I see that.
That is Chuck's screen, actually.
Okay,
So he has allowed us to allowed his screen to be shared.
okay. Well, we can go on.
Yeah.
It's a little aggravating, but as I told everybody, it will be amusing.
Yeah.
Was
The
there
other thing was, the next thing was
Oh,
thanks, that's it, was disinfectant. How do we get, how are we able to introduce disinfectant internally? Rubbing alcohol, turpentine, something like that.
now you mean this was on the news conference?
I'm sorry?
This was on the news conference?
Yes.
I
Yes.
think Trump
Yes.
is not a drinker, so he doesn't understand the difference between rubbing alcohol and vodka.
No, he was talking about disinfectant. I came up with some of the, with rubbing alcohol.
Oh, I
I can't
see.
remember what he said, but
Okay.
it was other things.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The next thing was that we found out Dr. Fauci is out. He disagreed with Trump on whether it was going away in the fall or not.
What do you mean
Okay.
out?
Out.
As in no longer working or just no longer on TV?
Probably no longer on TV, I hope.
That sounds like that may be your opinion,
Yes.
because he didn't say it. He just said he just disagreed with him. And that was
Yeah.
the extent of it.
Well, he wasn't at the press conference.
But he
They
hasn't
have a
been at
different
all.
guy at the press conference now.
But he has not been at all press conferences in the past.
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily. I'd be
There
very
was a,
very surprised if he was out of there completely.
yeah,
I would be
I
very
would be
troubled.
surprised too. But there was a thing along the bottom saying Dr. Fauci is not doing this. At any rate, the CDC head gave his presentation instead. It was, well, I didn't see it, but according to the people that did, the doctors, the MDs that did see it, said it was erroneous and incoherent. It had full of slides, etc. The next thing this was not at the press conference, but the thing that bothered me a lot was McConnell saying the states should declare bankruptcy. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Well, in addition, he made it clear that it was the blue states that should declare bankruptcy.
Yeah, well, he didn't. I guess he did say the blue states, but he was really talking about the states that were heavy into, had a lot of people with that were infected and dying. Examples of New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Michigan. Those are the 4 that he identified, I guess.
I got a clarification. I didn't hear
Yes.
that part. So you're saying he said those because of their states dying, is what you're saying?
Because they're spending so much money on the controvirus, they should declare bankruptcy because they've run out of money, basically. And he said, I guess.
I'm not sure about Massachusetts, but New York, New Jersey, and I'm not sure what other states and they're primarily blue states that are in financial problems before this whole virus thing started.
Well, the context, I heard about the context. I didn't hear McConnell's specific statement, but I did hear the context in the reporting. The states, among which were New York, have been saying the federal government has got to compensate the states for all the money that they're spending on the contravirus. And McConnell has been resisting in all of the different money bills that they passed, giving any money to the states. And now supposedly, I think this is number 5 that's coming up. Everybody's digging in their heels and saying, we got to give money to the states and the hospitals. And McConnell said, well, wait a minute, I don't think we should do this. The states should, in fact, if they don't have any money, go bankrupt. Which of course means they can't raise any money to do anything. So they will become completely dependent upon the federal government, who's the ones who won't give them the money so they won't go to bankrupt. So that's kind of what was going on. And this thing about blue states, I think, was amplified by Cuomo this morning, because I did hear Cuomo ranting on that. And he was really pissed for, I think, logical reasons. And he was basically saying that the New York has a surplus that they give to the government of about 140, 150 billion dollars every year. And Kentucky, which is represented by McConnell, has a deficit on the money that they give to the federal government every year of about 140, 150 million dollars. So he was all over McConnell about that. But that's what I heard.
What was your factor, Bob?
Huh?
What was the factor you gave? 140 what?
Billion.
Right. Okay. I thought you said million.
No, definitely billion.
This is New York gives this to the, is the federal government giving it to New York, or New York gives to the federal government?
No, what happens is all the taxes and fees
I
that
see.
are generated out of New York, and then the money that New York in turn gets from the federal government for various programs.
I see. Okay.
There's a profit. The federal government makes a profit on New York, and then, as it happens, close to the same number is the deficit from Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
So that was what that rant was about. I think he had reason to be upset, but that's my own personal opinion. I don't know, Chuck. Given what we've been saying,
I thought I heard somewhere recently that, and I heard it before, that states cannot declare bankruptcy. I don't know if that's all states or limited numbers of states, but I thought I had heard that that's not an option.
Oh, I didn't hear any. The first thing I heard about bankruptcy was today, so I don't have any independent information on that. But what would happen is that, assuming they did declare bankruptcy, the cost of borrowing money to do anything like repair a bridge or pay for schools would become prohibitively expensive, because people aren't going to lend you money if they don't think you're going to pay it back.
I mean, that would be double whammy for each state, actually, given that there is the coronavirus problem. Then the next thing would be the bankruptcy problem. Then the third problem would be they can't get up.
Yep.
So that's not a good option, actually.
Well, I got the impression earlier when I heard McConnell saying something, he said his preference would be that they should declare bankruptcy versus the federal government picking up their debts.
I think that's.
Well,
but I'm not sure that's really an option to do that anyways, as far as bankruptcy.
I don't know if that's an option, but you know, the federal government has paid out almost $20 trillion in tax cuts since Bush took office, and in terms of deficit, you know, the yearly deficit adding to the national debt, and to get fiscally responsible now on this one thing is really it's humorous, sort of humorous, but you know, to be fiscally conservative after you've wasted $20 trillion, it's to me it's outrageous.
So you're saying
Well-
that Bush is responsible for all 20 million, or all $20 trillion?
I'm sorry.
Are you saying
Who's
that
responsible?
Bush was responsible for the $20 trillion?
The Bush tax cuts are $500 billion a year, and that's gone through his presidency, through Obama's presidency, and actually through Trump's presidency. So 18 years of 500 billion, that's 9 trillion. The two wars are what? They're probably $6 to $8 trillion. Trump says it's 8 trillion. But you know, Bush, I think Bush and Obama were 4 trillion each, and I can't believe 2 trillion each. But I can't believe that that you know, since I don't think it's been that much for Trump. Trump's tax cut is costing us, you know, $1 trillion a year.
Well, it just passed in the past few months about $3 trillion worth of payments that are financed by debt.
Yeah. Well, I'm not talking about any of that yet.
Okay.
So all of this stuff that had to do with tax cuts and war have you know, added up to before we had the coronavirus. It added up to what, 20 something, 20, you know, 22, 23 trillion dollars. When not all of the, you know, it was almost 6 trillion when the national debt was almost 6 trillion when Clinton left office. So you know, in the last 20 years, it's gone up from 6 to, what is it, 22 or
or
something
23.
now? Yeah. So because of all those tax cuts, you know, plus the wars, it's kind of ironic that he all of a sudden decides to get conservative and get fiscally responsible. That's my opinion. You know, given facts, anyone can reinterpret facts no matter what. You know, select facts and reinterpret them, and so. But the other thing is that nobody's watching the Fed. I can't understand why people aren't talking about the Fed, because from October they've been creating $50 billion in checks to the every day, $50 billion a day, and now lately it's been $1 trillion a day. They're just and that has nothing to do with what the national debt. It's just they're lending money to other countries. They're buying stocks. Bob, you said they can't buy stocks. They're buying stocks. They're keeping the Dow up.
Are we lending money? Are we lending money to other countries or giving money to other countries?
Lending. We're lending money to other countries.
My
But there-
understanding, we were
Well, military
giving
aid
them-
generally is a little different. Military aid.
No. This isn't military aid.
Money to buy-
This is lending
Huh?
money to other banks.
The banks.
But
Yeah.
if this money is just paper money, not backed by anything, is it worth anything?
Not
then?
backed by anything.
So is it worth anything?
Well, any
No.
loan
I mean,
is that
it's worth as much as the dollars in your pocket.
Oh, okay. Which is,
It's expanding the money supply.
Right.
So
All
If,
right.
if there's
right, if you go to the bank
there's
and
a
say,
certain amount that says the total of the money is worth, X number of pounds of gold or silver, and you double the number of dollars, then each dollar is worth half as much as it was before. It's something like,
Wow.
Yeah, but
that's the example. I'm
gold
trying to
and
say.
silver are not the basis of.
I know
any-
they're not. The prices haven't moved.
The key here is that you have a credit card, whether it's the feds, whether it's the Federal Reserve, whether it's you and I, you have a credit card. And if you go and use a credit card to buy something, you're going to feel good. The question is, how are you going to feel when the bill comes at the end of the month? Or in the case of the feds, at the end of the year, or 10 years, or whatever it's going to be. At some point, you're going to have to pay it back, or people aren't going to give you any more.
The
wow.
Fed is not borrowing. The Fed is giving the money. The Fed is not borrowing it.
But it's printing it.
They're
Is that
getting they're getting the money, and it's accounting entry. It's paper, but they're getting the money in part from the Fed, from the Treasury, and in part
they're
from
not.
the reserves.
No, they're not
Thanks.
getting money from the Treasury. They have a checkbook and they're writing checks. There's no money. They don't have any money to back it up.
So it is just a question of accounting gimmickry.
Mhm. Well, if you think about it, that's how banks have always have operated
Recently.
after they stopped being just a safe place to put your cash.
Well, there was some time ago they had to have a gold backing for the money, but now
Right.
it's not.
Right, that went
So-
away in the 30s.
So that's the problem, I think.
We have a few minutes left. I would be
Okay.
curious to know what you guys think about when we reopen, how we reopen, and how things will be different when we reopen, not only initially, but X number of years from now.
I was just going to say something before we get into that. Well, maybe
Okay.
we get into that anyway. What I was going to say, I was just going to address what Paul talked about, that you can use heat to kill the virus, or you can use ultra sunlight to kill the virus. Killing virus by sunlight is really true, because ultraviolet light can inactivate it. That part is, but you cannot transfer ultraviolet light into your body. It is a surface topical application. Same thing for the alcohol, topical application. And heat, of course, will also inactivate it, but you can't transfer that much heat into your body, because what happens is our body can tolerate about 105 degrees Fahrenheit temperature, and then it starts to become just like a boiled egg. And so that means beyond that temperature, it is no good. So the actual temperature that the virus could be killed by is about 133 degrees Fahrenheit. That is beyond the 105, which the body can body will basically be dead. So that is no good. So what can help is essentially a vaccine And that's again addresses what you were asking. What would be the new normal? New normal will be better when we have a vaccine against the coronavirus, COVID, that causes COVID-19. Now, at the same time, you also need a gamut of uh, medications that are proven to be effective. And once you have that, then we can easily move around. Then somebody gets the infection, they will have a protocol to treat the patient with certain drugs, and the patient will survive. And right now there is nothing like that available. So that's why there are lots of candidate medications available, and people are recruiting in trials. And we don't have data from real clinical trials right now. Everything what we hear is just anecdotal, or people have been given a medication to one patient, two patients, 10 patients. But that doesn't prove it proves that the patient survived, but that does not prove long term is it really detrimental, or what the actual dose should be. So all that has uh, to be really cleared up, so that just like in the case of HIV used to be a deadly disease, but now we have a real good set of medications, so that the person who gets infected, you give them the medication, the patient is no longer going to die. The patient is going to live as long as everybody else lives, but the disease becomes a chronic infection. And but there is no vaccine. So in the case of coronavirus, they are hoping that there will be a vaccine, but we don't know that yet. It will take another 18 months to get there. But at the same time, of course, there are the uh, plasma plasma exchange problem, where you are giving the coronavirus survivor plasma to people, and that's a good treatment. But again, we don't know exactly at the moment what exact dose should be there, and is everybody's plasma as good as anybody else's. All that again is being investigated, because right now again there are clinical trials going on for that also. And but that means that we are going to look at, in about 18 months, we should be looking forward to a new kind of world, where although the virus will come back, of course, then at that time hopefully we'll be better prepared, hopefully, and be so that we can then move around easily. So
Well, one of the
that's the new
things that I
normal.
was reading was that we have never successfully come up with a vaccine for a contravirus.
For coronavirus, there is people have there are actually some vaccine candidates have been worked on, from Oxford, for example. They worked for the SARS virus. Now the problem is that there used to be something called SARS virus, which was again in China, but then it did not run around throughout the world. It went to Korea, but then they controlled it and they learned something out of that. And similarly, you have a similar virus, which is the Middle Eastern virus, which again, people still get that, but that has not completely been eradicated. But because again, people have been working on to create vaccines, but in order to create a vaccine for a smaller number of people, you need a lot of funding. And because there is no money, people don't get to work on all that. Because that's what I keep on saying, that unless we look at it from our country side, that look, there is an infection in Africa that is going to come to our shores one of these days, we better be prepared. In order to be prepared, we have to really invest into research, invest into preventive measures, And if we are not doing all that, we will never be prepared, and there will be no vaccine. And we will never know if there will be a vaccine, because right now there are maybe about more than 50 candidate vaccines around, which people want to advocate and get going. But then the question is, which one will be not only effective, but also will not kill people? Because you don't want something to inject into people that you will say, well, it's a good vaccine, but a patient died. You don't want that. So that's why it takes time, and it needs money.
Mm.
So that's the problem.
All right, well, in our time left, let's talk a little bit about what the world's going to be like in 2 months, 6 months, 18 months. I keep hearing different times when we'll go back to some form of normal. Chuck, you're representing the other side. What do you think is going to happen?
I think it's going to be a gradual process here, obviously, region by region, in some cases state by state. But I'm not sure. I think we're going to have to go through trial and error to see what things work. And I think we're going to have to be dependent upon a certain amount of this herd mentality, or however they call that, herd, so that
Immunity.
Herd immunity.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Herd immunity.
Right. And I think that certain amount of that's going to have to happen to get it balanced out as well as possible.
Do you think that these protests that are going on in some of the state capitals are a good idea? In some cases, they're being ridiculed, but I'm somewhat sympathetic to how the people are feeling. At the same time, do you think that they're creating a bigger problem than anything else?
Again, it's there is a certain level of freedom here that's at jeopardy with the government coming in with a heavy hand and saying that you're almost, to some degree, having to be under house arrest, and that you have to abide by what the government says, in spite of whatever the Constitution may say and what the Bill of Rights may say. And so I think people are fearful of their jobs disappearing and what that's going to mean for their families, and just to what degree is all this worth if their lives are going to be destroyed? They might as well go. I think some of them might figure they might as well go out fighting, literally, just to try to reestablish their lives.
As I said, I'm somewhat sympathetic. I'm just wondering if, number one, they're basing some of their anger on fallacious information. And for example, they were attacking, or at least some, not all of them by any means, but some of them were attacking medical personnel trying to go to work, saying they were fake. They may believe that, but when they do that, they're attacking the people who may in fact be trying to save my life in 2 weeks. And so I object strongly to that idea.
Bob, I think there are going to be fringe elements no matter what. So it's a small percentage, very small percentage, and it's a fringe element. And I think you just have to ignore it for the time being and take a look at the bigger picture. And
Yeah,
the
I
bigger
agree with
picture,
you, Paul. I would agree with that, Paul. I think it's a fringe on both sides.
Yeah. I was impressed with the Mississippi governor who was on afterwards, a little bit later. Mississippi is doing really well. They have few cases. They have, relatively speaking, they have few deaths. They have they implemented the stay-at-home, social separation very early, and they're actually, quote, coming out of the all of the restrictions in a much better state, much better. I said state, but state of being. I was really impressed with them. With that governor, he was able to have a very few problems, and because what they did was they analyzed the situation in depth prior to it getting out of hand, as opposed to denying that it existed and then getting overwhelmed by it.
I think there was about 7 or 8 states that had very little, if any, restrictions in the Midwest, like
Right, South Dakota is one of them.
I think there were 7 or 8 of them.
Yes.
Yeah, the upper Midwest. There, the Dakotas and maybe Iowa and Wyoming.
Yeah,
Those-
Utah maybe. They were all in that general area.
Yeah,
That's where you have the Dakota and the Iowa. You have this meat plant problem right now.
I think that's a long-standing problem that's just coming to the fore. People, supposedly an employer has a responsibility to maintain a safe environment for work. And obviously the meatpacking plants are not safe environments, but OSHA has been cut back to such an extent that there's really no protection for the workers. And some of these guys, as Chuck was pointing out, have a choice of going to work and taking a chance of getting themselves and other people sick, or never seeing a paycheck again. So at some point, the federal government, has got to step in. And again, looking at things, since there's no way to keep somebody from Memphis or somebody from Mississippi going to work in Memphis, which they do a lot, and then coming back down where Tennessee has some serious problems. I don't know if Memphis specifically, but the state has some serious problems with COVID. So no matter what Mississippi does, it could be for naught.
When you have the new normal, we may see that we may never be able to shake hands or hug people in the near future. And we might have to, if the federal government comes in and keeps saying that you have to maintain such social distance even while you're talking, that means you will limit the gatherings for a foreseeable future. And you may have to do that until that herd immunity builds up, or vaccine is there, or the appropriate medications are there. It's kind of a strange phenomenon where they will have to balance the constitutional freedom versus the healthy populace.
Well, you just brought up something which I remember because of something I learned a number of years ago. Children require physical touching, physical comforting. When they don't have it, they grow up with a serious problem in terms of trust. If the new normal says you can't hug your kids or your relatives, the young kids who your nephews or grandchildren or whatever, are we going to develop a situation where literally the cure is worse than the disease?
That is the problem. That's why I think it is imperative at the moment that the society gets the act together at the highest level to push for reliable, effective medications, so that even if people are infected, they can be treated and treated safely, so that they come out at the other end rather than die. So as long as you can create that, then it's okay. Then you can hug anybody you like.
Right. Well, unfortunately, as you pointed out, we don't have that. We're not likely to see it for a while.
No, that's the problem. That's why we have a problem for another 18 months like that. So, and then you have the experts talk about how you will have the second wave show up when you have flu on top of that. So you have a kind of very difficult situation.
Well, where are we going to get the medical personnel? Forget the beds, forget the masks, the ventilators, etc. Where are you going to get the medical personnel to handle this second wave, particularly when we're losing trained medical personnel today?
Well, that's the dilemma. That's why it's a good idea to get medications out there. That's why NIH is running a lot of clinical trials on different medications. The Ebola medication, you have the hydrochloroquine, you have various types of vaccines based on different kinds of technologies, and let us see which one works. So I'm sure there will be progress in the coming months, but not right now.
2 minutes, guys. 2 minutes.
Okay. Anybody got any closing points they want to make?
I guess
Chuck
the only
is saying-
closing point that I'd like to make is take a lesson from Mississippi. They implemented the social distancing. They studied the problem, came up with an approach, and so far their results are much less than everybody else. And it's not from not having tested, because they've tested a lot of people.
Well, I want to say that is the first time I have ever heard anybody who suggests that they're liberal saying, take a lesson from Mississippi.
I was flabbergasted. But, you know, you have to give credit where credit is due, and credit is due to that guy.
What are you basing it on, Paul? I don't know. As far as Mississippi, is that based upon the rate of death versus the population, or the amount of cases, or what is the?
They've had few cases. They've done a lot of testing. They implemented social distancing and staying at home very early, much before anybody else. Not anybody else, but
No.
much before.
I'll be
And
interested in looking at that state.
You know, I was expecting, you know, when I heard Mississippi, I was expecting that they would completely ignore everything. And but this guy, you know, this governor had a very intelligent approach. I was very pleased to see that.
Sounds good.
All right. Anybody else?
Hope for
You
the
may
best.
be off. Wait.
Okay.
Tad, are we off?
I think we're off.
Yeah.
Even,
Hey,
even Tad is gone.
9 o'clock. I have. That's what I have.
Yeah, you're all done.